to add to that, right? Like you're supposed to have all this on lock also becomes that you do have all this on lock,
Mm-hmm.
right? So remember, it's not visible. You are carrying all this. You are ethically executing, right? So to the external world, you got it. What do you mean you need help?
Justine Asante is a leadership identity architect, author, speaker, researcher, and founder of the Institute for Sustainable Authority and Glamorous Goddess Coaching. She's the creator of Harmonious Sustainable Authority Model, the Performance to Power Evolution, and Performative Productivity, a concept that names how high-achieving women often tie their worth, identity, and authority to how much they can carry and produce. With more than 15 years of experience in relational systems, identity, and leadership patterns, Justine helps high-achieving women leaders stop confusing over-responsibility with power and begin leading with clarity, peace, and sustainable authority. She's also a wife, mother of two, woman of faith, tea lover, shoe lover, and book club member who brings warmth, depth, and lived understanding to conversations about success, identity, leadership, and what it means for women to stop abandoning themselves on the way to achievement. Hi, Justine. Thank you so much for being here on the
Hello.
Savvy Shift. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so that is quite the background. That's quite the history, and so much of it resonates with me. And so I want to start off with how you came to be doing the work that you're doing today, because I think that there are so many high achieving women who need to hear this message. And as someone who would kind of probably put myself in that category as well, maybe you can do some coaching for me here today too. So,
Absolutely. So obviously background is kind of rooted in working with women identity, moving into the space of systems and leadership. And over the 15 years of my work, I've worked closely in as a therapist with couples, families, leaders, and in relational systems. And over time, what I kept seeing was this pattern that kept showing up for itself is that so many high achieving women are successful on paper, right? They secured their job, they have the titles, but and they were like capable, trusted, responsible, right? Often the one that everyone is depending on. But
mhm,
privately, they were carrying more than anyone would ever even imagine or could see. And
mhm,
that shows up in my clinical space in my therapy room where we're suffering from panic attacks,
mhm,
anxiety, stress, right? And life transitions. And so quite often it kept showing up as like, man, I'm so stressed. I'm having anxiety. I'm not sleeping, right? And what you saw is like they were able of carrying all these decisions, this emotional labor, the responsibilities of family, business, pressure, and expectations. And there was this silent, quiet belief that I saw transcending across all women from different sectors of life and different industries that if I stop holding it together, one, who is going to take up that mental? And two, is it going to fall all apart?
mhm.
And so that ingrained belief that if I'm not holding it together, it's going to fall apart. I started to understand it even further as I explored my own um, ways of leading and showing up and understanding personally, like in different seasons where I was showing up, like I was capable, I was handling things, right? I'm the clinician in this space. I'm doing this work in this space, leading, serving, nurturing, and building. And I kept it moving. And something felt unsustainable within my own life doing
Mhm.
that, right? Where I'm like, this is too much, right? But I'm also the problem solver. So it's like too much. Okay, I'm just find the problem, put the solution, the bandage on there. Okay, right. All right. I just carve out this time, or I'll transcend this to this space, right?
Mhm.
But it felt very uncomfortable to delegate, to ask for help, right? Because I'm the one that is being dependent on for all these different things. And so I began to learn like carrying it all in every space. Um, and that everything, I had to be in touch with everything. And I
Mhm.
kind of started questioning, like, wait a minute, if I'm struggling with this as well, And I'm seeing it within the women I'm working with in the different spaces and capacity. It's got to be something different that is happening, right? That it can't just be us as individuals not being able to, withhold our boundaries or delegate, right? There's got to be
Mhm.
something structurally and systemly that is impacting the way we show up. And so I
Mhm.
start to unpack even deeper, going through the work, doing some trauma work and different things, and seeing like there are structure systems that continue to reinforce these patterns, right? So whether it started as a young person, I said, like, quite often I heard from your family, oh my gosh, you're wise beyond your years. You're so responsible, right? And you did such a great job. So started tying that to like, oh, the more I carry, the more I do. This is the reward of the praise, right? So that's formulated my identity very young of like,
Mhm.
oh, if you're the capable one, then you get praise. Then you continue to transcend that, right? Into
Mhm.
the different spaces. So you continue to absorb more and more, right? Because it's getting reinforced by that praise. And so that's
Mhm.
where that performative productivity comes in place when a woman's value, credibility, and authority is tied to how much she produces, carries, solves, right? And anticipates.
Mhm.
And so in a tying, then I'm like, wait a minute, there's something here. And as long as you show up in the space, then the structure and the system will continue to drive things your way.
Mhm.
And so it becomes like, well, what does that mean for you? Right. And so oftentimes I say, like, it is not a delegation problem, right? You're not exhausted because you have, poor boundaries that you can't delegate. It is because there is something identity wise that keeps you tied into that. And until you unpack those things, boundaries are going to be unsafe. Delegation is going
Mhm.
to feel like a threat to how you show up because you're the one who shows up and does everything. So if I take that away from you, then who do I become? And so that's really like the journey of kind of full circle unpacking it. And what led me to where I am now, or doing the work through the Institute for Sustainable Authority and Glamorous Goddess Coaching, is that I saw that in the clinical space, right? If you don't enter into those spaces, you're not talking about it. And as CEOs, founders, and women, it's very unsafe to talk about it because you have the success, right? On paper, it looks beautiful. How do you even unpack that? No, I am drained. I am tired. This is
Mhm.
too much. This is unsustainable. Because what are you communicating out there?
Mhm.
And so trying
So
to uplift the conversation beyond.
yeah, yeah. So there's a few different things that you've mentioned here. I want to first talk about you had mentioned, the emotional labor. And I think women, especially women who are in families, we carry a lot of the emotional labor of keeping that family going. And I wanted to talk about this idea because emotional labor, first, what is it? But also, it tends to be invisible labor. It's the kind of stuff that people don't put value on until all of a sudden, let's say you stop doing it and then the whole house falls apart, right? And so it's like, how do we, first of all, what is it? But then, second of all, how do we actually overcome the idea that as women, we are responsible for all the emotional labor of a household?
So the emotional labor is that you are in that constant face of bracing, right?
Uh
And that's
huh.
how right? Because it's invisible, it is anticipating what is going to happen. So you are always 10 steps ahead of the game, right? And
Mm
absorbing what is the atmosphere going to be like? How do I navighmm navigate this space so that everyone is right? What does it look like? How do I kind of absorb this so that you don't have to take on the burden of that, right?
hmm. Mm hmm.
And it's very unconscious. You're doing it automatically. It is ingrained in you. So you're like, okay, what is the dynamics meant to be? Okay, so then I need to, triage it in this way, or I need to show up in this space, right? If I react this way, then I know this is what's going to happen. And so
Mm hmm.
oftentimes I'll neglect what is necessary for me to speak up, right? In order to ensure that the room is comfortable, the people are comfortable, the
Uh
family
huh.
is comfortable, my team is comfortable.
Uh
And so I'm
huh.
continuously anticipating, okay, this is going to be a really tough conversation, right? What emotional capacities am I going to see in the room? And how do I kind of navigate around this? It is
Mhm.
embedded in you to, but it's also not yours to carry, right?
Mhm.
Gotta allow people to experience that. But because it feels like a threat to the system and keeping things afloat, it's like, let me continue to do it, right? And it's
Mhm.
out of the best intentions, right? We're not doing this like because we're like, oh, it's the best intentions to keep the system moving. And quite
Mhm.
often it does, right? It works.
Mhm.
Hence the reason why we keep doing it. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
you did so well navigating that tough situation, right? That's one more thing you've absorbed, right?
Mhm.
Okay. I do know how to handle tough situations, right? And as women, it's just kind of the default, that nurturing piece of it that
Mhm.
we've been conditioned to believe that we need to take on. And so it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm able to do it. And so I continue to recycle through this emotional labor of doing that. And so my mind is always on overdrive. Half the time when I sit there, it's like, I feel like your brain doesn't turn off. And I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, because you're bracing for the next thing. We're always bracing for what's going to happen next and being the problem solving and anticipating where things may fall or scale up, right? It doesn't have to always be the negative. It can be like the next evolution of like our business, our innovation, right? But it's always on the constant go.
Mhm.
So
And
how
so
that's how
some of the things that you said there, you've mentioned a few times now, structures and systems. And, I wanted to talk about like what exactly are the structures and systems that kind of keep women acting in this way? And then also, how are some of the ways that you help women to get outside of those structures and systems so that they can help to? Because what I'm hearing you say also is that women are also abandoning their own wants and needs for the comfort of other people and for, like, oh, I have to emotionally manage the situation because I know if I say what I really want to say, that this person's going to react this way. And it's just easier for me to to act in this certain way so that it doesn't create a big thing. Right. And so I wanted to talk about like what exactly are those structures and systems that keep women performing this emotional labor and like what are the reasons why she feels like she has to do it, but then also what are healthy ways for us to kind of change the system so we don't actually have to do that. Because I can also see you had mentioned here about panic and anxiety attacks. And when you're constantly managing other people's emotions and acting in ways so as not to, get negative feedback from other people and negative emotions back from other people, that can create really a sense of panic and anxiety because you're always on edge and you're always looking out for like what's the next thing that I need to manage.
right. So structures and systems can look, it depends on the which space, right? And so the
Mhm.
woman that is performing this at work, you can see the pattern transcending across multiple areas of her life, right? And
Mhm.
so the structure system at work may be like, I'm the one that everyone goes to, everything filters through, right?
Mhm.
Why? Because I've shown that I'm capable or I'm responsible. I'm the one leading everything. And so even though this is for you to handle, it almost feels like it needs to go through a pass through of you in order
Mhm.
for it to, get that stamp of approval, right?
Mhm.
And it's like,
Mhm.
says who, right?
Mhm.
But if you would tie it back to identity, right, there is a system there that you built around that that influences why that shows up, right?
Mhm.
That, oh man, I got this together, but I know like Samantha, if it goes through her and I get the seal of approval, then great, right?
Mhm.
And so the system continues to channel things through you. You're the problem solver. And so, like, even if I had the solutions, I don't have to think through it anymore. I'll just navigate here because she does it all well, right? And so the
Mhm.
system learns how to kind of navigate things through you, whether it's for you to take on or not. And you see
Mhm.
the same systems happen in your home life, in your friendships, right? Like you're the go-to person, right?
Mhm.
You hear that. You're the strong one. You're the one, you're capable one, this problem solver, right? And these are all traits that we embrace, which is good in every sector of time. It is just kind of questionable when it's always in every time, everything. You feel
Mhm.
like that is where your identity lives, right?
Mhm.
And so you're not questioning it initially because to question that is questioning my identity. It's just
Mhm.
how I show up, right?
Mhm.
And when it's not sustainable or when I'm right, like avoiding my needs and wants, it's kind of like, I'll get to that. This is why
Mhm.
self-care is unsustainable, right? I do that one vacation. I was like, that's really not going to recalibrate your spirit, right?
Mhm.
Because you're going to go back into those default roles,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And so the systems are really built around what atmosphere you're in. So at work, it shows up in one space. At home, it shows up as me doing everything, me handling everything, me scheduling everything, me
Mhm.
delegating but checking,
Mhm.
right? Because delegation is not safe, right?
Mhm.
I know this can get done through me, right? It's almost like everything that filters through you, gets done right in a sense.
Mhm. Mhm. So, how do we overcome that though? Because this is something that I have also struggled with when, they always say, like, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, right? And at a certain point, especially when you're trying to grow a business or, like just if you're working at home and you have to manage the family, right? At a certain point, you can't do everything. And so delegation becomes really, really important. But when you feel like, you can't delegate because or you have to delegate but also micromanage, right? And then that's not the kind of person that I think most people want to be, right? Like most people don't want to be micromanagers. They want to be able to delegate and give authority to people and just be like this, go with it. But how do we get over that feeling, that need of having to like check people or like looking over their shoulder or micromanaging when we're feeling like we need to always be hands on and we're that person, right?
I guess like there's two folds to that, right? First, let's evaluate what success looks like for us, right? So if success stops being measured by what a woman could build, earn, hold, or prove, then success also has to be measured by whether she has access to herself and the life she wants to build, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
when you say like, how do I change that? How do I recreate that? If we go back to, well, why do I feel like that is my position to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And beyond just like the external, but looking within, like, why do I feel the need to over hover? What am I fearing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do I fear? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the fear there? What does it say about me? Right? And when you start to kind of reveal those areas, that one, like it's not a personal failure that this has happened, right? There are things that continue to reinforce this, right? You start to begin to rewire, as I think, like how I take on things, right? So why? Why do I feel like I need to do that? Why do I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I need to hover? Why do I feel like I need to delegate and check and
Mm-hmm.
respond, right? It's almost delegate and then you have the response already. Like you have the answers already, the problem's already solved in your head, right? Why
Mm-hmm.
do I continuously feel like I need to be in that space? What is certain? What is the fear? When you start to unpack those things, right, you get to the deeper root of things that helps you to be able to stop and understand and then recalibrate to a system where, yeah, when I delegate, I can trust that it doesn't mean there's a deficiency in me. It
Mm-hmm.
means that I trust this can be done,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the team I built, or that's the
Mm-hmm.
family I've instilled, or that's the values that have happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really getting to that, like, what gets lost for me when I stop those patterns and
Mm-hmm.
behaviors?
Do you find that there tends to be like a pattern of like certain reasons when you're coaching people and you're going into and doing the deep work of figuring out what is the why behind these behaviors? Do you notice that there's a pattern of behavior that a lot of these high achieving women have for why they feel this way?
I feel like the underlining, obviously, everyone's space is going to
Everyone's
be unique to how they
mhm,
show up, but the underlaying or the commonality that transcends across is the threat to my success and my ability to scale or my ability to show
mm,
up, right?
mhm, okay.
And so if I'm not doing this, then what happens?
Mhm, mhm. Do you think that also some of it is just, like, women feeling the need to always perform? Or, like, feeling the need to always, like, keep showing that I can do more, I can be more, like that kind of thing as well?
Absolutely, right?
Mhm,
That hence the reason why we kind of like that performance to power, that you don't have to perform your authority, right?
Mhm.
You've earned that table. You are
Mhm.
capable. You are ambitious. You don't have to continue to show up and perform, that I'm worthy to be where I sit.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
And so, yes, there is a deep pattern of like this idea that there's a productivity to this pattern of performance, right?
Mhm.
And I perform in this space, right? I want to say like it's reinforced by that praise, right? If it wasn't getting some type of reinforcement, right, we may question ourselves sooner, right? But when it is getting right, the praise, the notability, the acknowledgments, right, the promotions, right,
Mhm.
then well, how could it be wrong when this is what I'm rewarded with?
Mhm.
More
Mhm.
productivity
Mhm. Okay.
until I'm swallowed by it.
Swallowed by it. That's so true. I just did a few weeks ago I did a podcast about burnout, and I think that this is very much related to burnout because as women, if we're always feeling like we're having to perform all the time as well, like it's just a recipe for like you're always on and you never get a chance to rest. And I think you had mentioned, people taking vacation, but taking a vacation is not actually going to fix the burnout problem or the actual problem of coming back, and you're still going to come back to the same dynamics.
Right. And I think like burnout is the visible symptom once we've gotten far, right? But it's
Mhm.
also not the full story, right? For many high
Mhm.
achieving women, right, the deeper issue there becomes that at the center, there's too many systems that are floating through me, right? And so
Mhm.
I'm the one that is relied on. I'm the one who remembers. I'm the one who anticipates. I'm the one who's fixing. I'm the one who's absorbing it, right? I'm doing
Mhm.
all these things that burnout is like, I was like, it's not that personal failure because I didn't delegate or did all boundaries, right? Burnout just becomes like the symptomology that we visibly see.
Mhm.
Um, that can look like leadership in a sense, right? When I'm doing all that. But
Mhm.
if you really tie it in, like, what is it that's happening? So if I'm tying all those things that I'm carrying to my leadership, to how I show love to my family, right? To my
Mhm.
excellence, to my legacy, right?
Mhm.
Then burnout becomes the recycled story because like what happens if you don't tackle it at the identity level is that, oh, I put in like, okay, I'm going to take time, I'm going to delegate, I'm going to put boundaries, which is often what our leadership coaching and models do, right? We put on this like,
Mhm.
you need to do these things. And it's like, well, if you never look at why and go deeper to what is a tying, what is the fear, what is happening, what's the identity tied that, I'm going to cycle back through and burnout will show up again until we get
Mhm.
to the point where I was like, this is completely unsustainable and I'm leaving my career,
Mhm.
which is often the dire route. It's not that I wanted to, right? That ambitious woman can continue to be ambitious, right? But acknowledging what is not sustainable for me, right?
Mhm.
Becomes, it doesn't mean that I'm losing ambition. It doesn't mean that I'm doing, but I am carrying differently, right? So
Mhm.
that those areas of leadership coaching becomes more sustainable, that when I do implement those methods and exercises, that it's fixed now, right? Because I was able to understand the systems that keep me going that way. I was able to kind of rewire that. I go through like that regulate is that my body and nervous system is literally recalibrated where I'm no longer bracing something's going
Mhm.
wrong or I need to figure this out or I need to be a step ahead, right? It's like, no, I can take a step back and then I can begin to reclaim what leadership really looks like. And when
Mhm.
I'm done with that, right, I'm radiating. Like you said, I think in one of the other podcasts of him with who you talked about like and reasserting our femininity and leadership. And I'm like, the reason why I went with Glamorous Goddess coaching is like there's this internal radiated power that you have, right? You don't have
Uh-huh.
to perform it, it's there, right?
Mhm.
And the glamorous is the external way of how you show up as a leader. And so that is powerful and embracing and knowing like, no, I don't have to touch that. And I'm
Mhm.
still a strong leader in
Mhm.
this space.
Mhm. So you had mentioned one of the things was that women often feel uncomfortable asking for help, right? And so I wanted to like deconstruct that. Like, why do we feel uncomfortable when we are talking or when we're experiencing these things and we're feeling overwhelmed, we're feeling anxiety, we're feeling the burnout, and like, why is it that we have so much trouble asking for help? And what are the steps that people can go through in order to kind of change their identity so that asking for help becomes safe? Because I think that's one of the biggest things is that we feel like asking for help is not safe because then people will question our identity like, "Oh, you're supposed to have all this shit on lock, you know? Like what do you mean you're having problems with this, right?"
Right. Or like even to add to that, right? Like you're supposed to have all this on lock also becomes that you do have all this on lock,
Mhm.
right? So remember, it's not visible. You are carrying all this. You are ethically executing, right? So to the external world, you got it. What do you mean you need help?
Mhm.
Like we actually go to you. And so it also goes back to like, what does out say about me? What have I internalized about receiving or giving help? Right. Because the ones that struggle the most with receiving help are the most helpful people.
Mhm.
And I question that I often ask, I was like, what do you get when you help someone? Or like, if it helps me feel good, I feel like I'm there for them. I feel like I'm, really being supportive. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be great to also give someone the gift to receive that from you when you ask them for help,
Mhm.
right? But what does that threaten, right? My capacity, right? Man, you can't do that on your own. What are you saying, right? Does it question whether I, have it together, my le- um legitimacy of like what I'm doing, right?
Mhm.
I ask for help. Is there a deficiency that I'm seeing, right?
Mhm.
And it's almost rewiring that, like, no, great leaders know when this is my sector and this is my lane and know how to say, like, hey, this is your expertise. Take this on, right?
Mhm.
And that is no threat to you, but it's actually a superpower in knowing that I got it all and I don't have to. And I can be able to ask for help when it's needed. And so it's that
Mhm.
rewiring of like, yeah, you've carried all this so much, you've made it a part of your identity and seeing like, man, you can make it sustainable when you are able to tap into that powerful space of asking for help. Right.
Mhm.
I also go through like what reinforcing things has shown you that help is a threat or help is unsafe or help um is not something that someone's willing to give you. And sometimes when you unpack that, it's like, yeah, I remember when I was really in this space and blah, blah, blah. And this is what happened. So I ingrained that into believing that I got to do it for myself. Like, what
Mhm.
generational messaging did you
Mhm.
also receive? What cultural messaging may be also a tie into why help seems like a threat or help
Mhm.
seems like something foreign and something you cannot do? Right.
Mhm.
And being able to unpack all of that also helps you kind of to retool what help can really mean for your sustainability.
Mhm. I'd have to say, like this is a personal experience, a personal story of mine. And like I have a very hard time asking for help because I do feel like I have to have it all together all the time, right? And so I have a very hard time admitting to myself when I'm like, oh shit, like I need help. And one of my experiences was that I went to a friend one time to ask for help. And then instead of, getting help, because when you're talking to a friend, like for me, one of the things about friendship is that we're supposed to be able to go to them and ask for help. And
Hmm.
and then they came back to me and they said, you only come to me when you want help, and it makes me feel like you're just using me. And so that was like a thing that I was like, "Oh, okay," so it really damaged me in terms of my ability to feel like I was able to ask for help, because when I actually had the courage to go to somebody and ask for help and then to get that part of sort of feedback, it was very damaging to me because it was already so hard for me to go to them and ask for help in the first place. So,
So Samantha, what then did you end up doing? What did you start to ingrain about help after that situation?
Well, it really made me feel like asking for help was not safe, but then it also really changed the dynamic of the relationship, you know? So I kind of felt like, okay, in my world, friends are supposed to be going to each other and asking for help, and it's given freely and with love, you know? But then when they came back and they said that to me, I'm like, okay, your feelings are valid, and if that's the way you feel, then I understand, and you have the right to feel that way. I guess I just like I felt that I really misinterpreted the kind of friendship that we had, and I was like, okay, so it really damaged the friendship, and now I would consider them like less of a friend. And it for me anyways, it's never been the same since, like, so I'm still like polite and cordial and all these things, and I reach out to them every once in a while to check in, but like it's just like it doesn't feel the same to me anymore.
Overall, and then you talked about, like, in that relationship and how that kinda changed the course of that relationship. Did you start to see help differently in other spaces?
Yeah, I think like for me just in general I became more cognitively aware of asking for help, and whether like also more careful about like who do I ask for help, like who can I trust, who will actually help me. And also when I was asking for help, I also feel more apologetic about asking for help, which I'm not sure is such a healthy thing either. So it really just changed my perception, like already as like an independent woman who is trying to do it all by herself, right? Which you can't build something on your own, right? You need a
Right,
team of
right.
people around you. And so, as someone who already struggles with that idea of like, I need to do everything by myself. And so, then the nature of trying to build something, it's like, man, like, who can I ask for help? Like, who is safe to ask for help? But then the idea that I have to apologize for asking for help too because of that experience.
So that's twofold there, right? Like, one, help almost became ingrained of, like, unsafe, trying to question, and
Mhm.
even we talked about this earlier of, like, that emotional labor. Now, even in the help, you're, like, you're absorbing the emotional labor of even asking for help, like, how are they
Mhm.
gonna respond? Is this trustworthy, right? Like, that's
Mhm.
all invisible things that are happening with you in a space where help is supposed to be freely given, right? And so
Mhm.
you absorb that and kind of are really cautious in how you know, go ahead and ask for help. And I say this in like your leadership and your family. That's where the patterns kind of transcend. Like, yes, happen in this situation, but then formulated almost my core of how helps, shows up. And so
Mhm.
help does become unsafe. And man, can I trust that you're helping generally? And questioning is like, you know what? To go through all that, I'm just gonna do it myself.
Mhm, exactly, right? And then that becomes like it kind of perpetuates the cycle of overwhelm and burnout because you feel like, okay, I can't go and ask for help because people will resent me for it. And so now I'm just going to try to continue to do everything by myself.
Right. So that not having that outlet to talk, like sure. The reason why I specifically really, like work or target high achieving women, CEOs, leaders is that you're in that space. They're supposed to delegate and help. Well, the help is supposed to come yours. I'm supposed to be the one doing
Mhm.
all that. So it feels the most unsafe to say that I'm at capacity, right?
Mhm.
That the idea of being needed is not the same as being powerful, right? Like
Mhm.
just because I'm needed does not mean that I'm honing in on my authority. And
Mhm.
until we're able to kind of dispack that, like we're going to continue to recycle back into those behaviors. So a woman who is successful on paper, right, will continue to feel deeply relied on in her real life because that is kind of how she's kind of built what
Mhm.
success and being a leader is formulated on. And therefore, help is inaccessible in a sense.
Mhm. Mhm. So you had mentioned at the beginning actually that when you started this work, it was something that you realized that you were also doing and experiencing in your own life. And I wanted to, if you don't mind going into that a little bit, like how did this come up in your own life? And then also how did you make the decision to like start focusing on that, because I think it's so interesting that the things that we struggle with ourselves are usually the things that we end up helping other people with. And so I wanted to kind of go into that further, like how did these issues arise in your own life, and then how has your own experience helped you to serve women that you're helping today?
I think like it shows up in this is not hence the reason why I was like burnout is a symptom, right? It's not like all of a sudden I'm just burned out, right? It is a
Mhm.
cycle, it is years, it is it can go on for years. You may not actually even unpack any of this until like you're retired and then like, man, I was exhausted,
Mhm.
right? When you take a step back. And so it is patterns that continue for years of like I said, from childhood, you've been told you're capable of doing this and you can take on this. Breaks it like, man, I'm really good at what I do. And so that's how I show up. And so when there's pieces of like your health being compromised, right? Like, man, I'm really not sleeping well. I'm not understanding that, right? Um, or neglecting things that you really used to enjoy. I'm like, man, when did I ever like stop doing this or stop showing up for myself, right? You start to question those moments, and that was happening. Like sleep after kids sleep is like gone. It's like
Mhm.
almost like ingrained, like I'm never gonna get that rest or sleep again. But then it's like, yeah, but also staying up to this amount of time and doing all this or putting all this on my plate also probably is not contributing to the factors, right? Or feeling like I'm the in my partnership, in my marriage, like having to absorb this. And it's like, that's not sustainable either, right? And so you
Mhm.
start to question these different things, and you will be blind to say, like you sit in your therapy sessions and don't listen and kind of think of patterns in your own life and reflect, like, hmm, this seems very similar or common, and start to question those spaces. And so I think like in every sense of the way, I kind of retool. I feel like every new year, I'm pretty sure everybody puts it on. Okay, I'm gonna do these different things.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna absorb this anymore. I'm gonna make sure, I'm doing my best to stay this. And then less than 2 months in the thing, man, I'm still tired. I'm still doing this, right? Best of intentions. But like I said, if you're not attacking what exactly is threatened by you giving this up, what's threatened by you not doing this, you cycle back into the same thing. All right. And then it's like, you know what? I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to really put these practices in place, and you may do it. And something will show up that will be
Mhm.
like, you know what, it's only for this, and I'm just gonna get this done, right? And I'll get back to it, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, different seasons of your life is gonna call for you to recalibrate into different things. And unless you're aware of that, right,
Mhm.
it's harder for you to be like, oh man, like I really do need to pay attention to this space and this time and understand that this may take my energy. And ask for forgiveness and grace in this space where I'm not. And that's where like that it's not balance, but that harmony of like things are gonna pull me in different directions and giving myself the grace and space to do it. And I feel like I have to do it all. Right.
Mhm.
That is not about my capacity to not do it, but the problem is the price that it costs for doing everything, right? For feeling like I'm belonging, respected my authority, my power, right? Um,
Mhm.
not being threatened that if I say, I need grace and space in this space because I need this is pulling on my attention, that it doesn't mean I'm neglecting this. It just means that at this time and season, I'm able to kind of trickle things around. And I think like
Mhm.
in my own parenting and going through the journey of their transitions into school and different things, and having things show up really was like a life form. Like, this is a lot. I'm
Mhm.
not doing well. And that was hard for me to admit, right? Like being open and honest for a person in my profession that's the helping profession to then
Mhm.
say like, no, I'm not doing well, and this stresses me out. And I'm having some anxious feelings about these different things, and being able to trust, right, that I can go to my support systems and ask for help where it felt like a threat. But it's really kind of like retooling that and like, no, in order for me to continue to go, I'm going to need to, right?
Mhm.
And it's not a one and done. I'm always like, it's always that maintenance piece. Every season is going to question these things. And these patterns, because they were identity, they show right back up. And so you
Mhm.
gotta always take a step back. Okay, What is it meant for me to carry? What is it meant for me not to carry? And where do I pull in? Where do I coordinate? Where do I collaborate? Where do I ask for that help and being
Mhm.
courageous in that space? And then the season where I was being questioned about, my parenting and showing up and different things, I had to call on them and be like, okay, I can't do it all. And having those conversations with friends, with my husband, um, in systems like, no, I need this support.
Mhm.
And it's hard, right? Because like I said, if it's ingrained in you, you're always like, well, is it that like, you're just no longer capable of doing this anymore? Like, oh man, it's not a weakness, right? Like, it's not a personal failure, right? It is that you are able to take a step back and reflect and realize, like, to h- to be sustainable means that I'm able to know my capacity and be able to voice my capacity
Mhm.
and be fine with letting go. And I think that's the biggest thing, like that piece of letting go. It's
Mhm.
hard, right?
Mhm.
In that controlled environment that you've conditioned yourself to be.
Mhm. So I wanted to talk about because you had mentioned something about like the New Year's when we plan our New Year's resolutions or whatever, and then we within 1 or 2 months like we kind of abandoned those resolutions. I mean, excuse me, maybe 3 or 4 if we're lucky. And I wanted to talk about like what are the steps that you use to help coach women so that they, like don't fall back into like I like to call it kind of a default identity, right? This is our default mode. And so when we're trying to shift our identity and then, maybe we're good for like a month, 2 months or whatever, and then something happens and then we default back. What are the tips and tricks that you have to help women to really continue to pursue like because I believe that we're never fully finished, right? And so we're always growing, we're always evolving, we're always becoming better versions of ourselves. But what are the tips and tricks that you use to help women so that when they do kind of slide back in certain areas, and it might only be in 1 or 2 areas, right? It might not be the full identity,
Hmm.
but then
Hmm.
then like, oh hey, I just fell back over here. I need to step it up. What are some of the things that you use to help women make sure that they're continually moving forward?
I often use the analogy of like the temperature gauging, like you set it to a specific temperature, and whatever happens in the atmosphere is going to recalibrate it to that temperature. If it's too
Mhm.
hot, it's going to get there. If it's too cold, it's going to adjust itself, right? And so when you're doing this work and you've made the decision, like, you know, I used to really love 72 as my temperature. I'm going to move it to 70, right? That it takes the conscious effort to make sure that no matter what's happening, that I'm conscious when the gauge is going back to the
Mhm.
default, because that's comfortable. Even if it's not sustainable, it is comfortable in being able to control that, right? That's my sense of control. That's my sense
Mhm.
of like being on top of things. And so the very first thing is like it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Like that
Mhm.
moving of like temperature or moving of what I am used to default doing is going to take a lot of energy and effort to do it. But it doesn't have to, like, it's going to be work, but it's work that you want to get to because you want to make this change. And so it's like continuously being conscious of reevaluating. So not putting it like, okay, I made these resolutions, like put it front and center, evaluate where it's working, and have the analysis of like where the barriers come in. So, man, I meant to do this and said I wasn't going to take on that anymore, or said I was going to do this, and then I saw like my default patterns showing up.
Mhm.
What was informing those default patterns? What was happening for me, right? Um, and really taking a full spect of taking yourself out and seeing like what dynamics continue to play a role in why I default back to those behaviors or patterns, right? And then say, okay, well, what's my pathway forward, right? So being conscious of what is happening when it's happening, right? Like, man, I said I wasn't going to do that. Don't beat yourself up because it's happened, but use that as a learning. What helped me to get past it that time? And what kind of pushed me back to those moments where I'm redoing those things, right?
Mhm.
And retooling that. That gives you more information. What are my triggers? Where are some things that keep putting me back in the spaces where I said I'm trying to move from? right?
Uh-huh.
And the more you kind of pressure test that system, the system will learn and the environment will learn that, okay, 70 becomes our default.
Uh-huh.
Realizing that that may not stay there that time. So this season, this time, it may be comfortable there. And a different season as life will present its challenges, realizing that now, oh, I got to move the gauge again. And what happens in those patterns. And so being that flexible um, and knowing where I am and what season I'm in.
How do you know what season you're in, right? Because I really like this concept of thinking of life in seasons. But how, especially when you have so much going on, right? Like if you're a mom, you're in a marriage, you're running your own business, you might be like doing community stuff, right? So when you have all these different hats that you're wearing, how do you know what season of life you're in where, Because I think you
This
can also have different seasons in different parts of your life.
You can have different seasons, different parts of your life, and that is exactly right. The awareness, being aware of where I am in these different things, right? Holding the hat, right? And if I'm doing the work in all these different spaces, right? I can ask that, okay, in this season, I need more attention and space in the space of family,
Mhm.
because this is what's going on. And being able to understand what needs to offload or what needs to be reset or what I need to do differently in these other hats, right? So maybe I'm doing work, community, and family, but there's something happening in family that it really requires some more attention and care to it.
Mhm.
So it's like, man, I can't do those three community events instead of faltering into possibly guilt or feeling like I need to continue to do all these things. Giving yourself grace that like at this capacity, I'm gonna have to offload too. And working on that, right? Like it's that conscious working of like, I can let go of that and not let guilt hold me to wanting to do it all.
Mhm. Mhm. I also wanted to talk about motherhood and how women deal with motherhood and the feeling, like, because I think that there are different expectations placed on mothers than fathers, and probably more expert. I'm not a parent, so but I from what I see, I have people in my life who have kids, and I think there are very high expectations placed on mothers, and I want to talk about like how does that factor into um the feelings of like, I don't want to call it like the burden, but like the expectations that mothers have placed on them versus, like what they're actually able or capable of. And how do you have those conversations with your partner as well, right? If you're in a healthy relationship with your partner, that you feel like I can't do this all alone sometimes.
I think, Samantha, starting first with what are your expectations? Because
Mm-hmm.
there are societal expectations, there are things that are being placed on it that we observe. And so, what is
Mm-hmm.
tied to your identity about motherhood that
Mm-hmm.
continues to have you cycle through? I think that's the first stepping thing. What are your expectations of motherhood?
Mm-hmm.
And what is actually something that is possible to what is like, oh, this is a far reach, and I'm like, it's not nothing wrong to give that up. It's just like what redefine my parenting, how I show up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think oftentimes it is what I have put on myself as a mother that I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Opposed to like in your couple relationship, how you show up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
from there, it is really having that conversation. Same as like, what is my capacity? I can't do this, that, and the third. And having that conversation with your partner about what does
Mm-hmm.
it look like for caregiving and redefining that for yourselves,
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing it. And if you're in this space where you are parenting solo at that point, right? Also realizing like I won't have the capacity to do all these things and giving
Mhm.
yourself grace that I redefine my own parenting and how I
Mhm.
show up. Um,
Mhm.
I do a lot of work in attachment and I love using circle security because it's kind of like um, good enough is good enough, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes that is all you're going to show up and do, right?
Mhm.
And being able to show up in that light with the best intentions, even if it's just as according to circle of security, 30%, getting yourself that like you're aiming for 100 when really the baseline is 30. Let's
Yeah.
reevaluate why am I doing that, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to I have to carry it all. I have to be this parent. I have to show up and
Mhm.
giving yourself grace. Like it's tiring. I love you, dearest, but yeah, there's a lot going on, right? And giving yourself permission to have those true, truthful, authentic conversations
Mhm.
about your capacity and really giving yourself grace to not take on the guilt because I think that's what keeps us defaulting into those behaviors.
Mhm.
I have to. And if I'm showing up in this space, I got to show up in this space in every way.
Mhm. Well, I think also, there's so much judgment for mothers, like you can never do it
And
right,
it starts with yourself.
Yeah, you can never do it right. There's always going to be judgment or criticism from somebody, whether it's like,
Right.
other parents at the school or like your in-laws or whatever it is, and
Mhm.
so I think one of the important things though is that I think that goes with anything, though, is that you have to put your own safety mask on first, right? And so you cannot give to your children, you cannot give to your partner, you cannot give to, your community or your business if you don't put your own safety mask on first. And that's why I think this is so important to recognize like, okay, like I cannot give from an empty cup. And then realizing that it's okay to kind of take a step back and ask for help like we talked about. Talk to your partner, have those conversations. What are the expectations for how we, for my business? What are the expectations for my relationship and what like parenthood and all of these things? So I think it's about also learning to give yourself grace,
Mhm.
and also learning to tune out the noise because nobody else is living your life but you, right? So
Or parenting that child but you, right? That
yeah.
individual, that relationship, right, is unique to your situation. And so, yes, there are general parenting things that we're going to take across, but you are parenting that individual child,
Mhm.
and you have to, adjust and obviously by many reads of like some of the systems, but adjust to that child. And like you said,
Uh-huh.
the guilt, right? I would say the first guilt comes from yourself. Like,
Yeah.
what guilt are you holding and letting yourself have the grace of letting go of that guilt and how you show up really
Mhm.
shapes the way you show up in these very spaces and how you ask for help, right? I was talking to a parent the other day and I was like, the idea of a village, as cliched, like it really does. And so
Mhm.
the idea of not being able to ask for help also kind of like puts on that additional burden,
Mhm.
right? And so like man, you want to live your best life. You want to fill your cup. You want to engage in things that really are fruit for you that actually
Mhm.
impacts the relationship you have with child. Like if you're not learning that well for that child as well, right? We see it. They learn. We learn how we show up from our parents. And so,
Mhm.
hey, to be your best self is helping them to be their best selves. And so show
Mhm.
up for yourself. Ask for that space. Treat self-care should be obligation, not a treat after you're
Mhm.
exhausted. It should be embedded into your daily practices, even if it's 5 to 10 minutes that you have. It is that moments that really may just like give you the energy
Mhm.
to continue going on when it
Yeah.
is hard.
Well,
Um,
and I think that can also be really important to also teach your children that, right? Like mom's
mhm.
not here for you 24/7. Like mom
And
needs,
I'm also not a super mom. I'm
yeah.
not the strongest one. I'm not carrying everything and showing those vulnerabilities because that gives one, it teaches kids different ways, right? Hey, I need a moment. I'm not
Mhm.
feeling my best. Teaches that, hey, parents are not superheroes. They're not
Mhm.
ones that can do it all, right? Sometimes they need moments.
Mhm.
Sometimes they lose their stuff, right? Sometimes they
Mhm.
need moments, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to cry and whine like you are doing, right?
Yeah.
We may not show up in that light, but we have space. And so it also helps you kind of see you fully human and allow them to be fully human. Like I don't have to absorb different feelings or not show, right?
Mhm.
Show up in my space and we can nurture that together.
But I think that it could also really also benefit the kids because you're teaching them what conscious parenting looks like as well, right? And so when they
Mhm.
learn that from you, then they can pass that on to their own kids in the future, right? And so I
And
and
in
also
different spaces. Mhm.
Mhm, and teaching about emotions, right? Like emotional
Mhm.
regulation. If you tell your kid, "You know what? I just need a minute. Give me 15 minutes to decompress or whatever, and then I'll come and help you." I think that can also really teach kids, first of all, boundaries, but also emotional regulation and all these things, right? So when you show kids through living that I'm going to put my own mask on first, I think that teaches them about those things.
Mhm. Right?
Mhm.
And you we earlier on, you asked, like, how do we change the structures? How do we change the systems, right? Well,
Mhm.
that's kind of how you start to begin because the next generation that comes down on behind you, if I'm consciously doing this, right, I don't have to reteach you that you have to carry everything. You have to
Mhm.
be strong, right? Those things may have been stuff that were protective factors and different things, and you may have to do certain things depending on what culture, you know, where you show up.
Mhm.
And it does not have to be my default to
Mhm.
everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I really like the use of the word "and" there, the use of "and" versus "but." So it can be this and it can also be that. So I think that's
I'm
very
oh, I'm in a space of and. We can
mm,
be extremely frustrated at the same thing and happy that something is happening. So I'm always in the between ands and giving space to both because quite often we're gonna default to just engaging in the negative pieces of things. And it's like,
mhm,
no, we can see all sides of things.
mhm.
And so living in the and is like a space that I love talking about in therapy. I love talking with my woman. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
can be this powerful leader and be exhausted. And
Mhm.
what does that look like to change?
Yeah, exactly. So you have a book out. Let's talk about the book and the content of the book.
So much of our conversation kind of transcends into the book. I kind of
Mhm.
just put it out there as something for people to read in like a story like the quiet erosion of power is not this loud thing, right?
Mhm.
That oh man, one day all of a sudden like I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, and I'm giving everything up. It is those subtle moments where my
Mhm.
nervous system is in shock. It's those moments where I've had the panic attack or anxiety attack, or those moments where things didn't feel stable, right? And how it unfolds. So it's a story like kind of going over the different concepts of performative productivity, moving from performance to power, talking about what does it mean to have a harmonious, sustainable authority. And I said harmonious, not balanced, because it's not balanced. It depends
Mhm.
on it's orchestrated on depending on what is happening. And so it kind of goes over those common things that I'm talking about in a way that you can see it through a woman's lens of going through her career and
Mhm.
how she shows up.
Mhm. Okay. And I wanted to end with the question, number one, do you ever coach or work with men? And in your experience, what do you think are the differences between men and women? Why women kind of carry these burdens versus men tend not to? I don't want to give
Yes,
absolutes because nothing is an absolute, but
right.
yeah.
Um, Yes, I do work with men in therapy. I focus specifically on the advisory piece and coaching piece with women in this space because women in leadership are just you're just nurtured differently, right?
Uh-huh.
You're taught to be a leader in that space in a different light. And so
Uh-huh.
I see it differently in the practices, but it doesn't go to say that men in their own leadership do not struggle with the identity pieces and how you
Uh-huh.
show up in different spaces and the
Uh-huh.
emotional toll that may show up in
Uh-huh.
those spaces. So yes, it is different in that space. And I do believe in like collaboration and referring out to someone who has the expertise specifically and now to work with that. But yes, I do
Mhm.
work in leadership with men um in my therapy practice. I do
Mhm.
work in that space.
Mhm.
But specifically did hone in on working with women in this space, just seeing
Mhm.
more of the patterns and lived experience as well.
Mhm, mhm. Do you think that the reasons why women tend to absorb this, like, invisible emotional labor versus men not? Or do you also see, like, do men absorb different kinds of emotional labor, or what's your perspective on that?
I do believe there's different emotional labor, right? It may not be described in that, but I think in
Mhm,
right, wearing multiple hats because whether you're going into a space where you're the only or you're having to prove yourself shows up for them, right? Performative
mhm,
productivity is not just uh coined for a woman, right? It just looks
mhm,
different when it comes to men and how that shows up, right?
mhm,
And different conversation of how it looks like to retool that in that space,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Because much of like your leadership and doing that may actually be in that space and those behaviors showing up there. So yeah,
mhm,
do men absorb emotional labor? Absolutely. It just looks
mhm,
different.
mhm. How do you feel it looks different? Like, what are the specific ways that it would look different for a man than a woman?
I think like I would say to the space of that is just like how I'm nurtured around that, right? With
Mhm,
women, it's like it is almost ingrained in us to show up in that space to
mhm,
absorb and do all that
mhm,
and hold the room.
mhm,
Whereas for men, it may not show up in that light, right? It may
mhm,
show up as me being right the authoritative kind of person in the room, but that it may just look different in that
mhm.
space for different for
Yeah,
men and women.
yeah, okay. Okay, well, we are at time. This has been such an amazing conversation. If people
Yes.
want to learn more about you or get in contact with you, what is the best place for them to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn, so Justine Asante on LinkedIn. Also check out our website, Glamorous Goddess Coaching, or sustainableauthority.com. Check us out, learn more of our work, and yeah, we're here to support. We're here to have the conversation
Mhm,
beyond anything of like just supporting. It's even having the platform to have the conversation and opening it
mhm,
up. And that's it. That once we're able to reveal that, it's easier to feel like me too. And much of my conversations with CEOs and women leaders was like, yeah, you're not the only one experiencing that. And so
mhm,
having that platform and that space to have that conversation is enough to start to change.
mhm. Amazing. And we will put all the links to those resources as well as the link to the book, which is available on Amazon.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Justine, for being here
Thank you,
today. I
Savannah. This
really
was
appreciate it.
yes, thank you for having me. And I hope you feel better. I know you're under the weather.
Yeah,
Um,
a little
still
bit sick,
showing up,
but yeah, a
right?
little bit sick, but I really wanted to have this conversation. So, and I'm
Well,
glad that we did.
I hope that as you said, fill your cup and get well and take space for yourself.
I will. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Ah,
DJ Savvy.